Welcome to the Breaking News Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Capone, joined alongside my co-host once again, Evan Davis. And playoff baseball is less than 3 weeks away. Many teams are figuring out their magic numbers to clinch postseason spots, and slowly but surely, teams are beginning to get eliminated from contention. As the postseason approaches, many different contenders are at drastically different points right now. The Dodgers are slowly returning to health, with the return of Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Tyler Glasnow not far behind. The Orioles have been really underwhelming since the All-Star break, all this while seemingly being the most wide open path to the World Series in a while. All this to discuss, along with potential playoff X factors for multiple contenders, will be discussed on today's show. But first, Evan, I'll ask you, how are you feeling knowing your Dodgers are slowly but surely returning to full health?
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. And you looked at Yamamoto's first start back against the Chicago Cubs, 8 strikeouts in 4 innings. I mean, if he had the luxury of not having a pitch count, he very well could have pitched, into the sixth or seventh inning, and who knows how many strikeouts he would have had. The one positive is, when you look at a rotator cuff injury for a pitcher, one of the few things you think about is Tommy John surgery on the table. And with a guy like Yamamoto, you're this is a guy you spent a lot of money and you put a lot of commitment into, and the velo wasn't down, the splitter still looked great, and that's exactly what you were hoping to see. The one earned run could be up for debate. It was an error by Freddie Freeman, but nonetheless, you look at Yamamoto since that one blow up start, against the Padres in his MLB debut. He has an ERA below 2. Even with giving up what was it, like 6 runs in that first inning, the ERA is still at 2.88. uh this is a huge piece if the Dodgers are able, to get deep into October. Yamamoto could be the difference maker. And you just look at his stuff. The fastball looks great. It's still at 98. The splitter is disgusting. And the curveball is also just nearly unhittable. If you look at his statistics, it's the second most break on the curveball, right behind Dylan Cease. This he's nasty, and he looked really good. And then Glass now hopefully will be back shortly.
Yeah, that's the one thing with the Dodgers heading into the postseason, getting these starting they're two aces pretty much coming back at the perfect time where they'll
Hmm.
still get a couple regular season starts just to amp up and get ready for the postseason. Having Yamamoto healthy and he looked amazing his first start. 8 strikeouts, striking out the side twice. Like he looked insane in that first start, back from his rotator cuff injury, as you said. One question I want to ask you is that if Yamamoto, Flaherty, and Glasnow are all healthy come around October, who are your game one, two, and three starters in order?
I almost think that it's that order that you just said, where Yamamoto gets game one, Flaherty gets game two, and Glass now gets game three. You look at Jack Flaherty, and my God, with the injury now to Gavin Stone, like just how much more important does that Jack Flaherty trade become? And it's kind of been a win-win because you look at Trey Sweeney in Detroit, and he's been really phenomenal as well. But Flaherty with LA in 7 games, a 5-1 record with a 2.61 ERA and 41 and a third innings pitched. The walks are a little bit high, but you see that the Dodgers are always trying to tweak pitchers, pitch usages, and it just feels like that's what really got to Flaherty was now they try to lessen the fastball and insert the curveball more, but I think if you have those three all good to go, I think it should be Yamamoto, Flaherty, Glass now, and then game four. I'm a Landon Knack fan. He doesn't have the best metrics, but I think if you need a fourth starter, I think it should be Landon Knack. He's pitching tonight against the Atlanta Braves, and he's looked really strong in his minimal appearances.
Yeah, that the top three for the Dodgers rotation is already set. No matter what postseason time, you already know it's Yamamoto, Flaherty, and Glass. Now it's really that fourth starter, and even potentially a fifth guy. Walker Buehler and Bobby Miller have just been
Oh.
you just can't speak about them right now. Like Bobby Miller, an 8.17 ERA in 54 innings this year for the Dodgers and only 12 starts. It's it's really been like an awful year for Bobby Miller. And even Walker Buehler too, a 5.95 ERA. It's really been those top three and Landon Knack and you have uh even Clayton Kershaw, his injury that he's had is also another question mark for the Dodgers at this point,
Mhm.
where you were thinking, okay, Kershaw wasn't going to come pitch the beginning of the season anyway. He was going to come back around late August, and he
Mhm.
did. But you weren't expecting him to go down again with another injury, and that's just another question mark for the Dodgers heading into the postseason. That end of the rotation kind of guy. Um, but yeah, speaking of end of the rotational end of the bullpen, Michael Kopech has been another huge addition for the Dodgers. A 1.0 ERA in 18 games for the Dodgers, 22 strikeouts in 18 innings. He's just been an insane revelation for the Dodgers. And what a way to change for him from going from the worst team in baseball to the best team in baseball. It just completely changed him into a new pitcher. Like it's been an insane running for Michael Kopech.
Yeah, I mean, he scared me, a few nights ago when he loaded the bases on three straight walks against the Cubs, but was still able to only get out of it with one earned run allowed, picked up another save. But you just look at it, and the team has him under control for next year as well. You almost think like, although Kopech only showed up at the All-Star break after the All-Star break, it's kind of just like, where would this team be without him? Just the way he's been able to hold. He has seven holds, three saves with the Dodgers. Obviously the walks weren't as high, but had the three straight against the Cubs. So, the strikeout to walk ratio is still solid at 22-7. The whip only went up to 0.67. Just 100-mile-an-hour fastball that he dots, but it's funny because with the Dodgers, they've like his fastball is his best pitch, but with the Dodgers, they've really cut back on using his fastball and they've more gone towards the cutter, which allows for the fastball to be even that more dynamic. The cutter and the slider is what he's throwing a lot more, but that's what makes the four seam that much more appealing. Is that now you could just surprise a hitter because now he's not thinking fastball, but credit to the Dodgers for, they traded Miguel Vargas away and seemingly picked up what could be, I would say, come postseason time, could be a top three closer in October.
Yeah, just because, going into the postseason, you want you want kind of a guy that's kind of insane. And Michael Kopech kind of gives that like kind of insane mentality when
Yeah.
he's on the mound. And you'd love to see that from a closer where,
Hmm.
popping off the mound, screaming, like that's the kind of guy you want at the end of
Hmm.
your bullpen, just somebody who's literally insane about pitching. Another, the other two additions, well, we just talked about Flaherty, but Tommy Edman has been an insanely big power spike recently in the series against the Cubs, where he hit all four of his Dodger home runs in that series. What are your thoughts on Tommy Edman? He's been playing shortstop and he's been playing some center field too. Like, I want to get your opinion on just how good he's been for the Dodgers.
Yeah, like when that three-team trade happened, I was like, what did we give up to get Tommy Edman? Like, I was kind of confused. Like, we gave away like these two measly prospects that were playing in the Dominican Summer League, which, they could turn out to be great, but at 23 years old, like, who the hell knows at this point? And Edman, and every trade deadline, it's the same thing with the Dodgers, where they get guys that can play multiple positions, and that's no different here than with Tommy Edman, who could play shortstop, he could play center field, and he could play both positions. Very elite. And I'm not really, the four home runs, it's cool. It's the 300 batting average and the 321 on base percentage that really sticks out to me with Tommy Edman because this is a guy that really mashes against left-handed pitching. And in the postseason, you'll most likely see right-handed hitters or right-handed pitchers, but nonetheless, you'll always see those off chance left-handed relievers. And you look at Tommy Edman against lefties in 27 at-bats, he's batting 444. It's
Yeah.
incredible with an OPS above 1300. Then again, it's a small sample size, and the OPS really inflated because of those three home runs against Imanaga and then also Jordan Wicks. But you just look at Edmund, and he's so versatile. And I think that's exactly why the Dodgers got him. And he's another guy that's under team control for next year at only $9 million. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers picked him up.
Yeah, he's been a really good revelation for the Dodgers. Like you said, trading prospects that weren't really, you don't know what they'll pan out to be. Just seeing at their age right now, 23 years old. One more person I want to talk about is Max Muncy and his return from the IL.
Mhm.
He's been insane. Have an OPS over 1,000. He's really been a big revelation for the Dodgers. Him being healthy is another big factor heading into the postseason. 5 home runs in 19 games since coming back from the IL, slugging over 600. He's another thing where he's hitting around seventh in the lineup, and that's just another scary thing for pitchers come postseason time, having Max Muncy and already with the three stars at the top of the lineup, you have Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith, and now Max Muncy in that seventh spot in the lineup is an insane amount of depth for the Dodgers right now.
Yeah, I mean, how many teams can say that their number seven hitter has a 346 on base percentage and an 860 OPS? It's crazy. And you look at Muncy, and he's been a platoon guy for a majority of his career just because he can't hit left-handed pitching. But then all of a sudden he hits 2 home runs against lefties over the weekend, hitting one against the Cleveland Guardians, and then he also hit one off Jordan Wicks in that 4 home run slugfest where it felt like everyone was hitting home runs. But this is a guy, you knew what you were getting, especially when he came back from injury. And it's always just if Max Muncy can stay healthy, because we know what he's a 35 home run guy in his sleep. Like he's hit 35 or more home runs already 4 times in his career with the Dodgers. They know what he's capable of doing. He had 36 home runs and 105 RBIs last year. Obviously the injuries kind of derailed that, but if he could still stay healthy throughout October, that would just be a huge ad to get.
Yeah, it's been a really big thing for the Dodgers. Moving on, I want to talk about another contender, this one in the AL East. And over since the All-Star break, the Orioles are 25 and 26, hitting 244 with a 734 OPS in that span. They have really been just mid since the All-Star break, and they've been
Mhm.
losing to teams where they really shouldn't be losing, and they've lost this division lead. They're 2 games back of the Yankees right now, and while the Yankees are walking off back-to-back games, the Orioles are seemingly slowly losing walk-off games. They recently got walked off by um,
The Red
Tyler
Sox.
O'Neill. Yeah. Tyler O'Neill and the Red Sox. And they lost a series to the Rays. They lost one to the White Sox. How do you do that at home? Um, and they've just been slowly but surely just falling off since the All-Star break as they've been playing better competition. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Dodgers, so on. What do you make about the Orioles just being slowly regressing since the All-Star break?
Yeah, well, first, I'm not trying to like show you up, but they did win the series against the Chicago White Sox. They just
Yeah. Lost the one game.
lost the last game really poorly. But you know what? If you're gonna lose, just get buzzsawed, honestly.
Yeah.
But what was really concerning was the loss against the Tampa Bay Rays, because that is a team that cannot hit. Their pitching is really good, the Tampa Bay Rays, but they can't hit, and they lost 2 of those games while giving up a grand total of 2 runs. I mean, they got blitzed in the last one. Um, last night was kind of just difficult. Last night, whatever. Tyler O'Neill is going to make a ton of money, but this is kind of concerning because they're losing series to playoff teams. They lost the 2 of 3 to the Mets. They split the series with the Astros. They lost the last 2 to the Dodgers. I think the main thing has just been unreliability from the pitching staff. We talk about do the Orioles re-sign Corbin Burns, but you look at his last 5 starts or last couple of starts against top offenses, the 6 runs allowed to the Dodgers, somehow only one was earned. I've never seen that before. Gave up 6 runs to the Astros, 8 runs to the Red Sox, 5 runs to the Guardians. Regardless of if they're earned or not, they're happening on his watch. And you just think, like, what do the Orioles do? And they made that stupid trade for Trevor Rogers. I don't even know where Trevor Rogers is right now. Nobody knows where Grayson Rodriguez is. What's the status on him? Zach Eflin has been phenomenal. All of a sudden, he has strikeout stuff coming over to the Baltimore Orioles. I don't know what they did to switch up his mechanics, but he's all of a sudden punching out 7, 8 guys. It's a tough stretch as well. San Francisco, Detroit, and New York and Minnesota to end the year. Those, like, the Giants are kind of a sneaky team. They get overshadowed in the NL West just given how dominant it is, but they're also a team that's kind of hovering in that 500. And the Tigers are probably regretting trading Jack Flaherty because they could potentially make the AL wild card, and the Twins are also fighting for it. So this is a tough, tough scenario. It's the Yankees division, in my opinion.
Yeah, it just seems slowly but surely the Orioles are falling back while the Yankees are pulling ahead. Just a quick note on Trevor Rogers. In four starts in AAA Norfolk, he has a 5.87 ERA, 15 earned runs in 23 innings in AAA. Just what an insanely bad trade that was. And Connor Norby has been really good for
Unreal.
For the Marlins since then.
Uh,
It's just been night and day. A 913 OPS in Miami for Connor Norby and Trevor Rogers in AAA. But
yeah. Mm,
if Baltimore doesn't have, I'll say more notably Grayson Rodriguez in the rotation,
mm.
what do you believe is the realistic ceiling for the Baltimore Orioles?
I don't see how they make it out of the wild card series because at this rate, that's where they're heading. And my God, you look at Connor Norby's stats though, 260 batting average and an 827 OPS. That's someone you could really use. But um, I don't think they make it out of the wild card because I just don't trust their pitching. And I mean, obviously Corbin Burns is a solid pitcher come October. But then who else are you throwing out? Like, do I really trust Zach Eflin? I mean, I don't know. He just hasn't really been in those big spots. Uh, in a consistent basis, or at least I know with Corbin Burns, he has a 2.84 ERA in the postseason in 19 innings with 22 strikeouts. But it's him, it's Eflin, and then
Albert Suarez,
Albert Suarez. Like
Dean Kramer.
Suarez got roughed up against the White Sox. Like his expected ERA is just astronomically horrible compared to what it really is. Dean Kramer, I know he had an injury. Am I trusting him again? Like it's tough. And then Cade Povich, you can't really trust. I mean, he had a great start against the White Sox, but like whoop-de-doo. It's kind of like that's your stat padding game unless you're Albert Suarez. But
Yeah.
I don't think they make it out of the wild card series because I know Corbin Burns is going to be great, but I don't know if Zach Eflin is.
Yeah, and it's just a big question mark for the Orioles right now. And another thing is their hitting has slowly but surely began to fall off. You know, Adley Rutschman, his batting average has just been plummeting though. Like ever since
Hmm.
May, he's hitting 254 right now. He has a 719 OPS. And I feel like he hasn't hit a home run in like 2 months, where it's been such a it's been such a drought for Adley.
Hmm.
Um, Gunnar Henderson had how many home runs going into the All-Star, almost 30 and going into the All-Star break. And he's recently gotten back some of that power, but it's been a thing where the top of the guys at the Orioles lineup haven't really been hitting, and it's been just question marks left and right. You know, Jordan Westburg's still on the 10-day IL. Um, and he would be a really big thing for the Orioles to have right now in their lineup. You know, you're
Hmm.
missing an 815 OPS guy. And Jackson Holiday, since he had that hot streak in the middle of August, he hasn't really been doing anything since then.
Hmm.
And this is where one of the things where you could look at, like you said, Connor Norby, where
Hmm.
he's been so elite recently, having a 913 OPS in Miami. He could be playing second base right now, but you're stuck with Jackson Holiday playing second because
Hmm.
one, Jordan Westbrook's hurt, and two, Jorge Mateo's hurt. You're kind of stuck at a logjam where you're forced to be giving Jackson Holiday at bats when he hasn't really been doing anything since then. And it's just been question marks left and right for the Orioles.
I mean, yeah, you look at it. You bring up Adley Rutschman, and you bring up a good point. Over in the month of August, he had one home run, 10 RBIs. He hasn't hit a home run. He hasn't hit a home run since August 18th against the Boston Red Sox. That was his last home run. And this is not what you were expecting from a guy like Adley Rutschman. And the reason why I also say I don't put that much hope and faith into the Baltimore Orioles is that their offense is just so terribly inconsistent. Like they could have one game where they put up 6, 7 runs, but then they could have another game where, they get blitzed and they get maybe 4 hits or so. Gunnar Henderson this month, to your point, 3 home runs and 7 RBIs. We're midway through September here. Like we're nearing the midway point of September, and he hasn't recorded an RBI or a home run in his last 5 games. And, even in the month of August, he really fell off. He didn't have any I'm sorry, he had 5 home runs and 13 RBIs, but Gunnar Henderson shouldn't be a guy that's solely reliant on his power. And it's evidenced by 36 home runs, 85 RBIs. He needs to find more ways to bring in runs, and he just hasn't been able to do that. And the fact that the offense is just all struggling at one point just makes me think that they're going to be in the wild card. And although it won't be disappointing just given the state of this team, I still just I just feel like given the talent overall that we were expecting, you had to have made at least the division series again.
Yeah, just another note on Adley Rutschman real quick. Since the beginning of July, he's hitting 189 with 3 home runs. He's been anemic offensively. And one of the things I think about that this might be the reasoning why is because they're trotting him out there every day. He's
Yeah,
either DHing or he's either catching. And I
yeah,
think we've seen this before with other catchers that are forced to DH. Eventually by the end of the season, they're just tired. Like
yeah,
they're gassed. They're not used to be like catching every game. And then
hitting.
if they're not catching, they're hitting,
Yeah.
where they don't really get days off. And you said how his last home run hasn't been since August 18th. His last home run before that wasn't until August or July 19th. He's going
Mhm.
every month hitting 1 home run where it's like if I had a betting account, I would bet on
Yeah,
September 18th for him to hit a home run.
yeah,
It seems like
September
that's
18th or 19th. I'm gonna
yeah.
hit, I'm putting that down.
Yeah, because it seems like he's only going every month with a home run, and it's just been, you know, he's a really big factor for the Orioles going into the postseason,
Hmm.
where he is gonna, no matter if you like it or not, he's gonna be DHing or catching every single game.
Hmm.
And if his offense is as bad as it has been, I don't see how they even get past the wild card round, like you said.
Yeah, and you even look at it like he legit has just not taken a day off. Like unless the Orioles are taking a day off, he is not taking a day off. And you look at the catchers around the league. So Rutschman's at 134 games played. Will Smith is at 116. But those 18 games make a huge, huge difference, especially when you're talking about getting towards the end part of the year. And it's just the Orioles, but the problem is with the Orioles that they're just in such a tight race that they can't really afford to give Rutschman a day off. But the thing is, like, you might have to because that might actually be better for your team than not doing it. Like, you have James McCann available to you, and although he's not been great offensively, like, just put him at the 9 spot or put him in the 8 spot. Just give Adley Rutschman just time to breathe. I didn't really understand how bad it was with Adley Rutschman offensively. I knew he was struggling, but I wonder what they do.
And this is the second straight year of them doing this, by the way. Last year,
Mhm.
Adley Rutschman played 154 games.
So
There's
he's just
162
burnt.
in a season. Like, you can't be putting a catcher out there as young as him, like the one of the faces of your franchise, and eventually he's just gonna get burnt out. Where
Yeah.
he he started off the year hot and he was insanely good to start the year, but
Hmm.
it's just been ever since July, like not even it's been a crash and burn. He just hasn't been hitting.
Yeah, and I just looked at it right now. Like William Contreras of the Brewers is at 142 games. Like you got to sit him because now he might be trending in that same trajectory as Adley Rutschman, where great offensively, but next year he might just be burnt.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with catchers. They do such a great job, you know, in the lineup, uh normally more than half the season, like your number one catcher. But
Hmm.
having a catcher good enough where he's your DH
Hmm.
most of the time, that's one of the things where it gets scary because you can
Hmm.
overwork them. We've seen the Blue Jays tried doing this in 2022 with Kirk when he had such a good year.
Hmm.
And he really hasn't been the same since because they overworked him. And, putting a catcher out there every day, it's not good for their body. Their knees get shot up. You're putting Adley Rutschman out there. If there's a 3 game series, he's catching 3 of the games where
Hmm.
they aren't giving James McCann as many games. And I know that's because, well, he's not really good offensively, but putting Rutschman out there, that's not good offensively either. You're putting out a 180 hitter right now.
Hmm. Exactly.
Moving on, I just want to talk about there was a stat put out by Codify saying where the Dodgers and Phillies are both projected to win 97 games, to be the best team in baseball this year. This is the lowest amount since 2007.
Hmm.
And that was already such a crazy year where the where it was Rocktober and the Rockies went all the way to
Yeah.
the World Series getting
Yeah.
swept. So I'm just thinking, what are your thoughts on just how competitive this season has been? Now, there's been lots of injuries to many top teams, and it's just going to be weird that this might be one of the first seasons in a while where there hasn't been an 100-game winner.
Yeah. I mean, I need a beer after this season. Like, just get me to October at this point. I love it because I'm trying to convince myself that the fact that, the Dodgers aren't 22 games ahead of the Padres like they were last year might actually spark something in this team where, last year they were up by so much in the division. I'm sorry, 16 games in the division last year to the Diamondbacks and ended up losing to the Diamondbacks in the NLDS where, they kind of just lollygagged their way to the finish. But I think it's great for baseball. And yes, obviously, injuries have played a massive factor in this. I mean, you look at the Dodgers specifically with all of their pitching injuries with Yamamoto, Glass now, Bueller, Miller, uh, River Ryan, who was really good. That's hindered them. Talk about the Philadelphia Phillies losing Harper and Schwarber at one period of time. I mean, can we talk about the Atlanta Braves literally losing their entire starting lineup? They haven't had their entire starting lineup healthy since opening day. Like
Yeah,
that is just wild to me. And they're still battling in the wild card, which is just a credit to Brian Snicker, but it's also just the pitching has been carrying them throughout this entire season with Chris Sale, Max Fried, all those guys. But there's just been a lot of injuries and just a lot of poor play. But I think it's exactly what Rob Manfred wants because, this time of the year, last year, the Braves were up 14 games in the division. The Dodgers were up 16 games in the division. Teams are up by a lot, and it just made September baseball kind of boring. Like fans were just waiting for October, where now you have the Yankees and Orioles in a tight race. The Dodgers are 5 games ahead of in the division. They'll most likely win it, but they also have a series upcoming with the Padres. So who knows where that goes? And it's just the Guardians, Royals, and Twins are in a tight race. This is what baseball is supposed to be like. It's meaningful games in September.
yeah, this is one of the things where, it's really great to see that there's been such large amounts of parity
Mhm.
where, like you said, this is what Rob Manfred wants. He wants teams, middle of September, he wants close clashes where teams are fighting for that postseason viability. And he's going to have that where, the Mets and the Braves have a
Mhm.
series coming up near the end of September. And that's really going to decide because they keep being neck and neck for that last wild card spot right now. And that last series, the 24th, 25th, 26th for the Mets
Mhm.
and Braves, that is going to have huge
Oh, I
implications.
can't wait for those. I'm gonna watch that as a fan.
It would be it's going to be such a dogfight where I wouldn't be surprised if the Braves try and, push back a starter's day just so if they can have Chris Sale start in that series because that's basically their postseason starting right then and there.
Hmm.
If you can sweep the Mets or if you can take 2 out of 3 from the Mets, either way, if either team could take 2 out of 3 from each other, it would pay such huge dividends for either team.
Doesn't this kind of give obviously not the same scenario, but to your point about the Mets as well, they play the Phillies 7 times down the
Yeah.
stretch, and they're 8 games back. Obviously, like the Mets would have to win like 7 of the 8 games in order to even like make it close, which I think is just way too difficult. But do you not get the same vibe? Like that Mets and Braves series is kind of like the Phil was it the Mets and Braves series when the Mets blew the division
Yeah,
and the
and
Braves overtook it. Now they could do
yeah,
something
2022.
similar. Now, yeah, now they could do something similar with the wild card. And to your point about do you push back a Chris Sale? He's right now lined up to pitch in that second game of the series against the Mets. And honestly, like with the Braves, in terms of their pitching, I wouldn't be overly concerned about like pushing a start back, whatever it may be, just because you're going to have Sale and Freed pitch in 2 of those 3 games anyways. And if you have Spencer Schwellenbach pitch the first game of that series, Spencer Schwellenbach has been really, really good as
Yeah.
of late. Like that is a guy that I don't mind relying upon. And obviously, I'm a Dodger fan, so I'm not like zoned in on him, but I have him on my fantasy team. I see what he's capable of doing. He's a high strikeout type of guy, and tonight the Dodgers are facing against Schwellenbach. It will be Sale, Morton, and then Fried. So you're getting all the top dogs. It's just a matter of how they handle now Reynaldo Lopez, who right elbow inflammation, similar to Gavin Stone. It's September 13th. I personally think Lopez is out for the rest of the regular season. And how they handle those fifth starts is that's what they should be focusing on more rather than who's pitching against the Mets.
Yeah, that's one of the big things where Lopez going down with that injury is such a big detractor from the Braves heading into this really important stretch of the season where, he had the ERA title for the year so far, a
Hmm.
2.03 ERA, and he's been really, really solid.
Hmm.
You know, I wasn't expecting from last year him to really end up doing this where he hasn't really been a starter before. Well, he was a starter in 2019 with the White Sox where
Hmm.
he gave up the most earned runs in baseball, but I wasn't expecting him to go back out there and be this dominant as a starter. And it's a really big loss for the Braves heading into this big stretch coming up.
Yeah. The one thing I would say though about Reynaldo Lopez, apologies, is like, yes, a 2.03 ERA, the fastball's great. His expected ERA is a 4.1. Like if you look at his pitching metrics, he hasn't been as dominant as people were projecting, and that's why he probably wasn't on many people's radar for Cy Young, just because his expected batting average against is 250 and his expected ERA is 4.10. And he's not getting strikeouts as much, only around 26%, but it's still, regardless, a great pitcher to have. I just don't think he's as dominant as people are making him out to be.
That's fair. But I'm just saying, a huge loss for them heading
Yes,
into this
nonetheless,
thing.
it's a huge loss.
Yeah. Moving on into this last section, I want to talk about contenders that we have, uh, and their specific X factors heading into the postseason. Uh, I guess you can go first, talk about your National League, and then I'll talk about mine. Just about, who do we think is such a huge X factor for these contenders into the postseason?
Well, yeah, I mean, you stole my thunder with the Dodgers, and I was gonna say Michael Kopech, but I'll change it up. I'll change it up just for the sake of talking about someone new. I think it's Gavin Lux. You look at him; he's been one of the best hitters since the second half of the season. He's a guy that plays good enough defense to keep him around in the lineup, but this is a guy as well who who's hitting at one point third in the lineup just because of all the injuries and was had a thousand OPS over a month stretch. And although he strikes out, a little bit too much for one's liking, he still has really, really solid numbers at the plate. He has a 311 on base percentage, batting 250 now on the year. And I just think if you could get Gavin Lux going as like a placeholder in that, he's kind of just been finding his way in that 6, 8, 9 spot. I think he could be a huge difference maker in that lineup.
Yeah, quick note on Gavin Lux hitting 317 since the All-Star break with a 943 OPS.
Yeah, it's just I was on team trade Gavin Lux before the trade deadline, but you just look at it, he's kind of cooled off over his last handful of games, but he's also just been in a weird platoon role coming off the bench. I don't understand it with Dave Roberts. It's because he can't hit left-handed pitching for his life, and for whatever reason, the Dodgers have faced a lot of lefties lately. But yeah, this is a guy who I was on team trade him, but if he could get going offensively, that would just be huge.
Yeah. Uh, I guess I can go with my next pick. My X factor for the Dodgers is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Just seeing as, him coming back from injury, if he's able to, get out there and pitch 7 innings in a game,
Hmm.
it really depends on his arm, where he needs to ramp up and get back to full health where he can throw 100 pitches in a game. Because if he can end up like that, throwing bulk or not bulk innings, but throwing a full game's worth of pitches, it's going to be like insanely good for the Dodgers where he can come out there, start a game one, start a game two, start a game
Hmm.
three, and really just dominate the opposing team.
Yeah, and I mean he's got everything in his arsenal. It's just to your point, they got to get him ramped up. And his mark was 55 to 60 pitches in his start against the Cubs. He'll pitch again this weekend against the Atlanta Braves. My guesstimate is that they go anywhere between like 60 and 75 pitches,
Yeah,
maybe like
maybe.
60 to 70 pitches around that, just continuously amp it up and just see, where he's at. And then maybe in that final start, before the postseason, or if he has two more, I don't know how the schedule would really work, but then you start talking about, 70 to 85, and that's when that you got him. But I mean, damn, he looked really good in his start against the
Yeah,
Cubs. I'm sure their fans, I mean, they ended up getting the win, but I'm sure their fans were just as happy the fact that he only had to go 4 innings. But I guess I could go back with my another National League contender X factor. With my top three were Dodgers, Phillies, Padres. So with the Phillies, I think it's Alec Boehm. I mean, this is a guy that he can just be such an energizer bunny in that lineup, and with their talent as well, with Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, to a certain extent, JT Realmuto. Alec Boehm just doesn't really have the pressure, but he's been phenomenal this year, and it's so weird. Like, how many times do you see a guy have 13 home runs, but 89 RBIs?
yeah,
That has to be the craziest stat I've ever seen. But it's because he has 44 doubles. And, they say power is what wins you games in October. But I just think with this lineup, and I forgot to even mention Trey Turner, like guys are going to be on base for Alec Boehm. And he's got the 804 OPS. He's batting 290 on the year. I mentioned the 44 doubles, a couple of triples. This is a guy we've seen him in October, him and Bryson Stott, like in the bottom of that lineup, just being energizer bunnies. He's my X factor for my second contender, the Phillies.
yeah. He's been really good, and he recently had that injury. He was on the IL for a little bit. He would be such a huge factor for the Phillies heading into the post. Like you said, 89 RBIs for somebody that he was in the home run derby, but he doesn't really hit for power.
Hmm.
Like 13 home runs at this point of the season, that's not really a power hitter.
Hmm. It's a
My
slow weekend for Otani.
yeah, my X factor for the Phillies is Aaron Nola. Now
Hmm.
you already know that Zach Wheeler is going to be the ace for the Phillies rotation, but I think Aaron Nola, I think the pressure is on him to
Hmm.
really help the Phillies and propel them to a further finish than how they ended up last year, where in the NLCS, because he is, I believe, the more important pitcher, just
Hmm.
because you already know what you're going to get with Zach Wheeler most games, and
Hmm.
but I think Aaron Nola is the one where, he had a bad year last year after finishing fourth in Cy Young the year before that. I think he's a really big factor for the Phillies heading into the postseason. If he can, shut down some lineups, have a game where he can pitch 6 innings scoreless, it
Hmm.
would be really huge for the Phillies rotation.
Yeah, and he was really dominant last year in the postseason. I mean, in four starts, a 2.35 ERA, a .96 WHIP, just 4 walks in 23 innings, 23 strikeouts as well. You're right. Like if Aaron Nola can be that Aaron Nola last year in the postseason, you have Wheeler and you have Nola. The only thing I worry about is who's that third starter, because Suarez has kind of just been, up and down.
Christopher Sanchez.
Christopher Sanchez, like Sanchez is good, but he's a ground ball guy. And
Yeah.
that's the only concern with him is just he's not a strikeout guy. And in the postseason, you need strikeout level guys. But then again, like not all lefties could be Chris Sale and, have so many strikeouts, or even a guy like Shota Imanaga. He'd be a solid number three. I just don't know how much faith I put in a guy like Christopher Sanchez and the bright lights because we haven't really seen him start a game in the postseason.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah, and to now move on, we just go to the final one. For me, my third contender in the NL is going to be the San Diego Padres, and it pains me to say the X factor, but I couldn't think of anybody else, and I didn't want to go with the obvious answer of Jackson Merrill, so I'm going to go with Fernando Tatis Jr., who, coming back from the 60-day IL, he again just finds himself batting second or third in the lineup. You have Luis Arias. You have Jackson Merrill just lurking in the 6 and 7 spot. It's kind of funny. Everyone talks about how the Dodgers paid and how the Dodgers are offense is loaded. Has anyone seen the San Diego Padres transactions? Because you paid for Machado, you paid for Bogarts, you traded for Arias, you drafted Merrill. Congratulations. Uh, but again, this lineup is also really expensive. And I just think Fernando Tatis, we've seen him in October and just the energy he brings to that Padres lineup. That's my X factor down the stretch and heading into October.
Yeah, I'm going with the other NLS team. I'm going with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and my X factor for them is Corbin Carroll. He is so important to this
Hmm.
Diamondbacks team. And you'd seen it when he was struggling early in the year, and there were thoughts about like, is this just like an extended sophomore slump? Like, what's really going on with Corbin Carroll? But his recent play where he's been, he leads the entire league, the entire majors in triples.
Hmm.
And his recent power surge since like the All-Star break, he's been really, really important to
Hmm.
the Diamondbacks. And if they want to make another run to the World Series, I think Corbin Carroll is a huge factor in that. And obviously, yeah, he's the face of the franchise right now.
Hmm.
Of course, if he doesn't play well, they're not gonna do well. But I really think that, if Corbin Carroll can kind of emulate what he did just last year in the postseason. He had 274 in the postseason. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things with Corbin Carroll, where last year he had 285 for the regular season. This year he's hitting 230.
Hmm.
And it's a really big thing for him if he can just get back to a higher batting average and hitting for more power.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at his last 30 games batting 293, and I don't think that's, like, oh, the obvious pick because Eugenio Suarez and Ketel Marte have really been carrying that lineup, and to a lesser extent, Josh Bell, even though he just got there. Christian Walker always has 30 home runs that no one talks about. Uh, but yeah, I don't think it was like sophomore slump with Corbin Carroll. I just think it was more he injured remember when he injured his shoulder and then
Yeah.
he wasn't good after that, and even in the postseason, like he wasn't that great, or he wasn't, obviously the 313 hitter that we were used to seeing. And it feels like now he's fully recovered from that injury. But could we just also talk about the 2019 MLB draft and how loaded that draft was? You're talking about Rutschman, Bobby Witt, JJ Bleday was in that, Riley Green, CJ Abrams, Josh Young, Shea Langoliers, Alek Manoah, Bryson Stott, Corbin Carroll. I'm just listing the first 16 picks, and then you go down the line with George Kirby as well, Michael Bush, Anthony Volpe. Gunnar Henderson was in that. Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman in the same draft. Holy smokes. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting lost here. But Corbin Carroll is only 24 years old. I was trying to just make the point that he's so young. Like, he still has time. And it's kind of crazy that he has 13 triples, but 19 home runs. I think that's just, the unfortunate reality of playing in Arizona, where you have that wall out in center field that is just so far and so tall that
Yeah.
everything's with his speed. It could be an inside the Parker, but he'll settle for a triple. Uh, but I just think, yeah, if you get him at the top of the lineup, and then like Eugenio Suarez and Ketel Marte both have over 1,000 OPS since end of July, this team, right now it's shaping up to be Padres and Diamondbacks in the NL wild card. I mean, my God, like that is
Yeah.
just gonna be that's going to be incredible baseball to watch from the outside looking in,
Mhm.
hopefully. Um, but 5 game division lead, hopefully, But we can move on to the American League, and in order, my top three contenders are the Yankees, Orioles, and Guardians. I know I was kind of harping on the Orioles, but it's with this lineup, it's kind of hard to ignore them. And I don't really love the American League teams. Like, the options are pretty slim. It doesn't feel like there's really one dominant team. I guess you could say the Houston Astros, but I don't know. It's really hard to pick a team. And so for the Yankees, anyway, kind of ranting here, I'm going to go with the newly acquired Jazz Chisholm, who in 33 games played, 19 home runs, 16 RBIs, 902 OPS, another Energizer Bunny that is going to be able to. I know he played in the playoffs against the Philadelphia Phillies a couple years ago, but this is going to be like his real chance at October baseball with the New York Yankees, just given, the talent on this roster. And you just look at Jazz Chisholm, and he's just been really, really solid. And, the home run numbers are kind of, I don't know what's the word to say. I don't know how to describe it, but, he hasn't been great in the month of September, but he also hasn't hit a home run since August 28th. He had that really insane weekend against the Phillies where he hit four of the nine home runs, but nonetheless, he's just still finding ways to get on base.
Yeah, I agree with that. Where he was a really important addition for the Yankees at the trade deadline, where they were
Hmm.
able to get him and plug him in at third base, and because Gleyber Torres didn't want to move over to third and let Chisholm play
Hmm.
second. But uh moving on, my pick for the Yankees is Luis Hill, and Luis Hill. It's been really like a tale of different months for Luis Hill.
Hmm.
April he started, he had a 4.01 ERA in April, and then in May he had a 0.7 ERA in May, including a 14 strikeout game, and following those two up with an 8 strikeout game and a 9 strikeout game. And then back in June, he had a 6.45 ERA month. The big X factor with the Yankees is which Luis Heel are we getting in the
Hmm.
postseason?
Hmm.
Where, Garrett Cole, he's a stud and he's going to end up being the ace for the Yankees in the postseason, no matter what.
Hmm.
But what are we going to get out of Luis Heel? What are we going to get out of these supplementary pitchers and more or less even the bullpen at this point? Where what are we going to get out of them? And that's one of the big factors of if the Yankees can actually make a deep run in the postseason. Because I look at the Yankees rotation right now, and none of these guys really stand out to me besides
Hmm.
Garrett Cole. I'm not really scared of Marcus Stroman. I'm not really
Hmm.
scared of Nestor Cortez. I'm not really scared of Carlos Rodon. Clark Schmidt is okay, but he's just recently come off the IL.
Hmm.
The big question is Luis Heel. If he can
Hmm.
be dominant like he was in May and in really if he can be dominant like how he was in May, that's a huge factor for the Yankees.
Yeah, you're right. Like you know what you're getting out of Garrett Cole, but outside of that, like you look at Marcus Stroman's numbers, it is not good at all. Like to be quite frank, and we knew like everyone knew that he wasn't a big strikeout guy, but this is a little concerning. His K rate is 17%. And that would be okay if you were a left-handed pitcher, but he's a righty. The average
Yeah.
around righties is, you want to be hovering anywhere between that 26-28% strikeout rate. And on top of that, he's also walking 9% of his batters. So the strikeout to walk rate is not good at all, a 1.43 whip this year. I don't trust him come October. And you're right. Like, you know what you're going to get out of Garrett Cole. You're hoping he gives you a dominant start. But if Luis Heel doesn't give you a dominant start, like, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, going into that third game, who do you even really look at start? Do you start Carlos Rodon? I feel like that's the one guy you'd have to
Hmm.
start just because, you spent so much money on him. Hey, you got to go out there in the postseason and prove something, man. Like that's what
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and you look at the counterpart here at the Baltimore Orioles, and I gotta go with who I think the rookie of the year is in the AL. But then again, it's slim pickings. It's Colton Cowser, who has been that everyday outfielder for the Baltimore Orioles, batting 243 on the year, 20 home runs, 62 ribbies, 763 OPS. But I don't think his defense gets talked about nearly enough. I mean, we talk about recently I saw with P. Crow Armstrong, and I mean, I have nightmares with all of the web gems he was making against the Dodgers. Like, my God, but Colton Cowser isn't that far behind when you look at his metrics in terms of outs above average. This is a guy that you talk about a struggling Baltimore Orioles lineup, but if they could even just be half of what we're used to seeing, and then Colton Cowser's in that 6-7 spot, you sometimes just need a boost from the bottom of your lineup, and that's Colton Cowser.
Yeah, he's a really huge uh factor for the Orioles just because their entire outfield
Hmm.
is really predicated on really good defense from Mullins and Cowser. And, Santander's out there most of the time in right field just because, you need his lineup, you need his bat in the lineup most of the time.
Hmm.
But Colton Cowser is an insane man out there in the outfield. My
He's in the 96%, sorry to cut you off. He's in the
Yeah,
96th percentile in
yeah,
outs above expected at 11, and then his arm strength is also in the 96th percentile.
yeah. He's an insane arm out there. Just anywhere you put him in the outfield, he's an
Hmm.
insane addition. My X factor for the Orioles is Grayson Rodriguez because he needs to be healthy for the postseason. He
Hmm.
needs to be out there and, pitching games for the Orioles when it comes down to the wire because like we previously talked about it, like who else are they going to put out there?
Hmm.
You have Zach Eflin and Corbin Burns, and then it's Albert Suarez, Dean Kramer, Cole Irvin.
Yeah.
Like you don't really know what else you're getting out
Slim
of that.
pickings.
Yeah. So I really think Grayson Rodriguez, if he can come back and if he can be healthy, I
Hmm.
don't even know how far he is along in his rehab at this point, but he's such a vital part to the Orioles right now
Yeah, I don't know. I remember like he left that start like before it actually started
against Toronto.
against Toronto, and we haven't really heard from him or seen him. Like he threw another bullpen session a few days ago, but it's still TBD on that. And I just, I don't know what's going on. Like he's not doing sim games. I just you're right. It's got to be Grayson Rodriguez, but it's just if he's not healthy, like this Orioles team is kind of
Screwed.
SOL as well.
Yeah.
And you talk about, the other contenders. I'm gonna go with the Cleveland Guardians just because top of the division, they'll most likely win it. And I'm gonna talk about Lane Thomas here, who really struggled in his first 30 games with the Cleveland Guardians. But you look at his over his last 15. I'll say, he struggled in his first like 25. Last 15 games,
Hmm.
he's batting 367 with a 653 slug and a on base percentage near 400. Had a home run in the series against the Dodgers, 3 home runs, 15 RBIs. He's also hit a couple doubles as well, stole a couple bags. I mean, this is what the Guardians were expecting. They weren't expecting a 367 batting average, but they certainly weren't expecting a 115 batting average with a 45% K rate with which is what Lane Thomas started his career with. But you have Jay Ram, you have Josh Naylor, you have Schwenman, you have Stephen Kwan, who's kind of been struggling as of late, but you got some power and you got some contact. But if you can get some speed with Lane Thomas, you got a full lineup here.
Yeah. He's another big part for the Guardians rotation or Guardians lineup, and that's why they made the trade for him because they
Hmm.
wanted to have that, that extra factor in their lineup, that speed, 32 stolen bases on the year. Um, Now my third contender for the American League, I chose the Houston Astros, and
Hmm.
my contender is another thing predicated on health, where it's Kyle Tucker. He'd been out since the end of June, and his numbers before he went down with an injury, the 19 home runs, and he's such a huge factor for them. Where if he's healthy and he's playing like how he was to begin the year, I don't
Hmm.
see any other team out there and like with a better lineup than the Astros if Kyle Tucker's healthy.
Yeah, you're right, but it's such a big if with Kyle Tucker because
Yeah.
a 10-day IL stint really turned into a 60-day IL stint. And I just think the Astros did a disservice to their fans by not saying that he had a fracture in his knee.
That's kind
uh,
of important.
I feel like us baseball fans kind of figured that out without being told because a 10-day IL stint doesn't turn into a 60-day IL stint on just a sprained knee. Like that you usually come back from, maybe within like 3 weeks, 4 weeks time. But now
A
that it was
month at
getting,
most.
yeah,
Yeah.
like a month at most to be like fully dialed in, especially that he's an outfielder. But I just, I don't see it. Like Kyle Tucker, obviously he got activated from the injured list, but it's hard to not trust Kyle Tucker, but at the same time, it's like you were out of the lineup for so long that like it could throw off your rhythm at times. And that's the one thing is like the health of Kyle Tucker. And now that we know that it was a fracture, that just it becomes a little bit more concerning because that just means it can happen again. And he's looked solid since coming back from injury. He's had a couple of hits in that game against the Oakland A's, had a hit against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Uh but if he could, continue this stretch, let's see. I want to give it more time. He's only played in 5 games since June 3rd. So I kind of just want
Yeah.
to give it more time to see what he turns into. But if it is the Kyle Tucker we're used to seeing, how do you stop Alvarez, Altuve, Bregman, Tucker, Yainer Diaz quietly batting 300?
Yeah, it's a really big factor for them just because, he's only been playing DH these last couple of games and he's
Hmm.
or pinch hitting, and it's really big for them where he needs to play in the outfield because
Hmm.
Jordan needs to DH
Yeah,
in the
Jordan
postseason.
can't play in the outfield.
Jordan can't be playing in the outfield in the postseason, but it depends on how far along Kyle Tucker is. Where do you put Jordan out there just because in the outfield, just because, well, we need Kyle Tucker's bat in the lineup?
That's the thing. It's like you take and you give
Yeah,
because I mean Jordan Alvarez defense is so atrocious
yeah,
that like it's almost like what do you do? It's a tough decision for management to figure out.
yeah, for sure. Anyways, that'll just about do it for this episode of the Breaking News Bears podcast. I once again want to thank my co-host Evan Davis, and I once again want to thank you guys, the listeners, for listening to this episode. We'll see you all next week with another episode of the Breaking News Bears.